The number one thing that I'm looking at right now as far as hacking is I understand machine learning is trying to do its best job. So what can I do to train it to understand what my objectives are? Because it doesn't understand English or whatever language you're speaking. Like, I don't care who you are. I mean, you guys are in Canada, so French or English or whatever, right?
Oui, oui.
It doesn't know that. You're not telling it what your goal is. So when it gives you a bad day or a good day, it doesn't know any better because you haven't told it what's good and bad. So what I'm really working on right now is how do I train an inanimate object to understand my business goals? And that has become the number one thing that's the driver of efficiency. And in that way, I have seen time and again efficiency gains far better than anything else by just telling the machine learning what your goal is. I had somebody, it's like if you're, when you're training a kid, if they can't understand you, like, okay, if maybe they're deaf, how do you teach them what to do? Like you learn ways to communicate with people that might not understand all of your words. How do you teach a kid what the alphabet is? Right? It's positive reinforcement, negative reinforcement. Yep. So you just do the exact same thing, and you have to understand what that reward and punishment system is for the Facebook platform. Well, one, I love the Power Five, and I remember when we were testing out each individual thing like 2-3 years ago. I remember when it was just an idea in Menlo Park, and it was great to see this come through. It's funny, on the back of my laptop right now, I have a sticker, like this transparent sticker of the Power Five, like test program, like the alpha of the Power 5 test program, and it's like the Power Rangers. It's this complete thing that they couldn't do, but some engineer did it. It's totally violating all rules. But I keep it as like a nice thing.
That's great.
I completely buy into it. I think it's absolutely there. I think what all you really need to do is limit the fringes. So if you give guidelines, if you give safety nets to understanding what those goals are, and we can go into massive detail about some examples of what that looks like, but if you can go into that, I think then you can really start to train the system to understand what it is. And it's as simple, I mean, for what it's worth, you can let the kid eat anything out of the fridge, but if you see it eating a cookie, you slap its hand. You're not preventing it from eating anything. You're saying you can make all the choices you want, but if you pick up something out of that, I'm gonna slap you, right? Like I'm gonna slap your hand and you're gonna be in trouble, right? Not slapping children, you know what I'm saying?
I could tell you're a parent.
So like that small bit of understanding, right? And I think it's what I think people try to do is either outsmart the system or they try to make wholesale judgment calls. And what I find is much better is incremental small changes, small little moves with really big ideas can if you're doing testing, really big things, you can move mountains. And all you really need to do is just say, I need to be 1% better than yesterday. I mean, it's that whole like that Nissan or Toyota, that's their entire business model. 100% native. It's the free tool. It's the automated rules. It's the number one most overlooked tool inside of Facebook. And I've actually talked to the automated rules team about telling them to make it more user-friendly. And they say, well, look, nobody uses it. We're super excited about it. We pushed it for like a year. Nobody got into it. And so now those guys are also working on the machine learning. They're working on like the new Facebook feed and I remember when you had a regular thing and then a power editor and then it all became power editor and then that got souped up 10 times. But the native tool does absolutely everything that you need it to do. And I think that you can run an entire business on 4 or 5 business rules. So for instance, I personally ascribe to, I've got like 2 major rules that I run, 2 types of rules, and then something to kind of clean it up. But the 2 types of rules I do, one is called a limiter. It's basically saying, because I'm an old audio engineer, it's a limiter. It's basically saying, if my performance has no way of achieving my business goal today, I'm going to turn this ad off. And I run ads day to day. And if you're not able to deliver me my goal, no matter what, say for instance, you're going to spend $100 today and you're $50 in and my cost goal is $20. That means that in the next $50, you need to deliver me 5 conversions for $10 or better. The likelihood of that happening is nothing. So I'm not going to let you fail anymore today because I've got half a dozen other things that are working. So I'm not going to let you fail anymore. And then I have something that's more of a sliding scale, which says, well, maybe you've gotten a couple, say the $100 and $20 example, maybe you got 2 by the time it went to $70. Well, that's great, but there's no way in the next 30 you're going to be efficient enough to get down to my goal. So I can have 2 or 3 of those that turn ads off throughout the middle of the day, and then I'll reactivate everything at night. And I will only use it. I will use it on every ad that I'm running and across every campaign, because I only have a couple campaigns. I mean, I've managed $50,000 days across like 3 campaigns. You don't need more than that. With that being said, I think the last piece is, if any ads aren't good enough, we'll get rid of them. And I mean, I can go into the whole rigmarole about that stuff too, but I think those are the 2 primary rules, is just reducing exposure to inefficiency, and then only relying on things that you're willing to give that risk to. But I know we don't have time to get too much into that, but like, to give an example of how this works, like optimization of your account. So say you're running those automated rules, right? And so then you're saying, okay, these are some limitations. Let's just say, for instance, that you've got 10 ads and your net performance is like $75, right? So you've got maybe 10 ads at $100 and 10 ads at $50. That gives you a net 75 on average. If you're able to eliminate 1 or 2 of those $100 conversions, then your net becomes less than 75. Which totally makes sense. Now what happens is, remember, Facebook is going to look at the performance that's previously been given. So if your net average performance is $75, Facebook's going to probably deliver you $75 tomorrow. If you can get your net average to 65, to 60, to 50, it's going to probably deliver you 65, 60, or 50. So what you need to do is use the automated rules to deliver impressions and conversions that aren't good. You're basically saying, the way that you slap it out of your hand is saying, you're on your way to getting a $100 conversion. I need you to be at a 75. Once you pass a certain threshold, I know that you're not going to likely get to that point ever again today, so I'm going to slap it out of your hand. So if you can get more conversions below your average, obviously your average is going to go down. And so then when the learnings happen at the ad level, every ad itself builds out a data pool, basically, of all the people that it's seen and all the people, the success that it's had. So every ad is effectively making a lookalike audience based off of people that have converted with it. So every ad itself is making a lookalike audience, where each piece of content is finding people that respond positively to it. Like we were talking about, people want to see the things that are good for them. So you might have 3 or 4 different sales pitches, right? And one sales pitch, one there's people interested in moms really like this, and really into ducks into this, and people really into clowns, they like this. But you have 3 ads inside of one ad set. It means you can incrementally reach 3 different groups of people. Maybe you have 1 or 2 for each one, so you can see what does good today and what does bad today. Because an ad that's gangbusters for the last 2 weeks might just have a shit day. That's fine. If you have multiple options, you can day trade between them. So ultimately what happens is, because the ads make lookalike audiences, when you run those ads inside of very broad audiences, you're not limiting their exposure. And if you have very few audiences, like a broad audience and maybe like a lookalike, then in one large, like, stacked lookalike based on different business objectives, you're giving that ad the broadest audience, which gives it the best chance of finding more users. And because if you have, instead of having a half a dozen or a dozen campaigns with a half a dozen ad sets in each one, creating 60, 70, 100 different ad sets, each one with a few ads in it, where every ad might get $50 today, might get 200 today, but your budget's like $5,000. Instead, if you put that in 2 or 3 places, you're letting each one of those see a ton of data points, which means every single ad itself is getting a dozen or 2 dozen conversions on a regular basis. So the lookalike audience that each ad is creating is smarter and smarter and smarter. And then when you eliminate the lowest efficiency ads on any given day, your efficiency will continue to improve. And then all you really need to do is continue to lower what those thresholds, what those rules are. Once you hit stability, if you're at $75 and you implement some rules and you get it down to 70, and then you're seeing that constantly, then you notch it down again so you can get a little bit lower. And so what you're really trying to do is prevent net higher CPAs on any given day. And you can do this with like half a dozen ads. Like if you have 2 or 3 ads and 2 or 3 ad sets or 2 or 3 campaigns, and you're spending all your money there, each one of them is likely to see hundreds of dollars of spend a day. And if, say, your cost per goal is $30, right? If you're spending $500 roughly per ad, or $500 per this group, each one has a massive chance to win and to fail. And you want it to fail. You want it to understand what good and what bad looks like. And when you start to turn ads off, what you'll find is the ones that are continually providing business objectives that you like are going to get more of the spend. For instance, if you've got 3 ads running and one of them gets turned off and the second one gets turned off and the other one's doing okay, what happens the next day? That one that did okay is probably going to get a little bit more spend after a week, after a month. The one that constantly gets turned off, even if you just leave nothing on it, it's going to get very little delivery. So when you're doing creative testing, all you need to do is find new ads to perform as good or better than your net average. And then you take that loser, you kick it out, and you bring in a new one that's doing better. So if you've got a $50, $60, a $70, an $80, and a $90 CPA ad, 5 ads in an ad set, and you bring in something and you're averaging $70, if you bring in some creative testing that's coming in at 65, you drop it in, you kill the 90, your CPA is going to drop 10% the next day. Overnight, you're going to see that performance. And so that's much better way of optimizing versus trying to find the right ad for the right audience. That theory worked 5 years ago before the machine learning was good. And that theory, like you were getting to before, really comes from a lot of the managers and a lot of the people that were really in charge of a lot of agencies came up in the Google world, where it's very, very much about CPC and defining the right ad. It was display advertising and everything else, where they're not really akin to Facebook's algorithm is seeing trillions of data points across billions of users 24 hours a day. It knows more than you. It's smarter than you. It's smarter than me. And hundreds of really, really smart people that are probably smarter than both of us are the ones building all that and are constantly updating it. So by allowing that machine learning to just understand what your business objectives are and preventing it from failing, just small little nudges in the right direction, like bumpers when you go bowling, right? Like just, okay, well, you can't gutter. You're not allowed to gutter today. If you're going to gutter, we're just going to go home. Then it's okay. And the only ads that you're using are the ones you have high confidence in. Yeah, I think the number one thing is I think people don't fully understand the way that Facebook looks at ads. Like they don't understand that an ad makes a lookalike audience based off the performance of that ad and finds other users like it. So you might say, well, this ad might really appeal to rodeo clowns, and this ad might really appeal to fans of ducks, and this one might really appeal to moms. It's like, if they're all in an ad set, they're gonna find those people. Right? So I think people really focus on this old school mentality. And I remember when it came around, because I remember before there was a conversion pixel. I remember every conversion event was a different pixel you had to put on the thing. We were doing traffic campaigns and trying to back out results. Like, it was a nightmare, but I remember that. And that's where the thinking really came from. But now understanding that Facebook's ecosystem is built around having the ad build an audience for its own and then letting it go out and find those people, I think that's one of the biggest misunderstandings, because really the only reason why you would have more than one campaign for any business objective is because you're trying to hack that somehow. So I will only have one campaign per business objective. If my business objective is the prospect for this product, I'm not going to have 10 campaigns competing with each other with overlap and all this other stuff. I'm going to go cite back to the Bombas case study, which Facebook has been preaching like gospel for 5 years, and it's because it works. Where you basically take an entire ad account down to one campaign with two audiences, a broad and a lookalike 1%. And what you're doing is that broad is reaching the most amount of people as efficiently as possible, and the lowest CPMs, so your conversion rates can be shit, but you're still going to be okay. And then the lookalike is providing is getting the low-hanging fruit, the best customers. Now, what I've done to improve upon that, and we've done 6-figure case studies with Facebook coupons across a dozen brands, is stacking those lookalikes to build them on business objectives. So my lookalikes will be previous buyers, CRM list, everybody that's ever bought the product, I want to be able to convert them for as cheap as possible. And then using the value-based lookalike audience that Facebook has. These are the customers that are likely to spend the most amount of money. Now, it's like a Venn diagram, right? So one of them is full of everybody that's going to convert for cheapest. The other one is everybody willing to spend the most amount of money. And then I'll do one more lookalike on the buyers that have converted since I did creative testing. Because if they like the people that have converted since I've done creative testing, and all my ads are the ones that are winners of creative testing, then they're the buyers that are most likely to respond to the creative that I'm already using. And what happens is those three circles all kind of overlap in some Venn diagram, and Facebook will target the overlap first. And what you really want, I see the biggest mistake is people say, well, our lookalikes are killing it today, or our interest groups are doing this, is that you're looking at it the wrong way, because it's not, is this lookalike doing well? It's this, is what is the overall blended customer acquisition cost for your entire platform when you're managing platform, part of funnel by platform by part of funnel by platform. So if your Facebook prospecting is working, then it's, yes, maybe your lookalike is more efficient than your broad, but when you spend up in broad, you can scale your account by 2x. But because the lookalike is more efficient, it's going to be spending less, but it drags your net CPA down. And so I think anything beyond that needs to have a business objective. And this is a good rule for 90% of people. There's always a reason why somebody's doing better than that by cheating that rule. And every business has a little tweak to it. It's not a golden rule. I'm not trying to sit here and tell people this is the only way to do it and everything else is dumb. But the more audiences you use, the more diversified your spend is, the less intelligent you're letting Facebook be, the more mistakes you're going to have by sheer just lack of training, which means it's going to be longer and longer for you to get stable results. And if you don't have stable results, you can't use optimization techniques to become more efficient. And it's always more efficient to get 10%. It's always easier to get 10% more efficient than it is to maintain the efficiency and spend 10% more.